General, I'd like to put aside the Lewis and Clark Fund for a minute, and I want to return to the direct injury argument, the Mohila is an arm of the state argument. Justice Sotomayor was pointing out, statutorily, Mohila has the right to sue and be sued. The state doesn't have responsibility for its liabilities, and the state has disclaimed any claim to the assets. Is that correct?
I would disagree with the last point. I don't think
Okay.
the state has disclaimed any interest in the assets.
So explain to me why. Because on the one hand, you have, in Missouri statute 173.420, you have the last sentence says that nothing in these sections shall be construed to deprive the state and its governmental subdivisions of their respective powers over assets of the authority. But then in the next section, 425, it says, no asset of the authority shall be considered to be part of the revenue of the state. So which is it? I mean, because it would be hard to see how a win for the state would benefit Mohila or a win for Mohila would benefit the state if the assets are completely separate. You don't get any money out of it. Putting aside Lewis and Clark, because I'm not really interested in that.
So, Your Honor, to go to the second provision you read, 425, it says no asset of the authority shall be considered to be part of the revenue of the state within the meaning of a specific state constitutional provision. So I would then say that's only for a limited purpose. The prior provision that you read, where the state has preserved its authority over Mohila's assets, shows that any residual interest in Mohila's assets belongs to the state. So we cited the reciprocal casualty exchange case in our brief that shows that the legislature could abolish an entity like Mohila, and if it did, the money would come back to the state. So the state does have the ultimate interest in the property of Mohila.
If the state wanted money from Mohila right now, if the state just wanted to pull assets out, say because the state was going to make a decision to fund the Lewis and Clark Fund, does the state have the authority to do that?
Acting through the legislature, it does.
Okay.
And I think the Lewis and Clark Fund is actually a great example of that. So the Lewis and Clark Fund wasn't created until 26 years after Mohila began its operations. And at that point, the legislature came in and said, Mohila, you have to start giving this source of funding to the state. So the legislature can come in at any time and request money.
Do you want to address why Mohila is not here?
Mohila is not here because the state's asserting its interests. Mohila doesn't need to be here because the state has the authority to speak for them. And that brings me to—
Why didn't the state just make Mohila come then? If Mohila is really an arm of the state and all of this would be a lot easier, I mean, the Solicitor General conceded that if Mohila was here, Mohila would have standing. If Mohila is an arm of the state, why didn't you just strong-arm Mohila and say you've got to pursue this suit?
Your Honor, that's a question of state politics, but we believe as a matter of law that the state has the authority to assert its interests. Under the factors in LeBron, under the factors that the Missouri State Supreme Court recognized in casualty reciprocal exchange, if it's a state-created and state-controlled entity that performs government functions, the state can speak for it regardless.